contractor. Princess Vaelyn bought his key was cheap. He had no combat designations on file. Nobody thought to ask why.
Princess Vaelyn of the Vethari Third House had a security budget that the diplomatic corps described, in the formal documentation, as constrained. What this meant in practice was that she could afford exactly one guard, and the guard market's available inventory at her price point was, by the time she reached it, a single listing. Cole Danner, human, unclassified contractor, no combat designations registered, available immediately. She had looked at the listing for approximately 30 seconds and then confirmed the contract, because she needed a guard and he was available, and her primary advisor Cell had said anything is better than nothing, and she had found this hard to argue with. Cole Danner arrived at the diplomatic compound the following morning carrying a single bag that was small enough to suggest either minimal possession or the kind of person who didn't carry things they weren't going to use. And Vaelyn had looked at him across the reception desk and understood, with a specific instinct of someone trained in physical threat assessment since childhood, that he was not nothing. He was large. Not aggressively, just structurally, in the way of someone who had been built by decades of use rather than deliberate training. He moved through the diplomatic compound security checkpoint with the unhurried precision of someone who had been through security checkpoints so many times they had stopped registering as significant. He looked at the guard positions, the sight lines, the entry points, in the specific sequenced way that was not casual observation. "You've assessed the compound," she said. "Force of habit," he said. "Cole Danner. I'm the new contract." "I know," she said. "I'm Vaelyn." He looked at her the way someone looks when they are deciding whether to say something. "Princess Vaelyn," he said. "Third house." "You know who I am," she said. "I read the contract," he said. She looked at him. "Most guards at your classification tier don't read the full diplomatic context of a protection contract." "Most guards," he said. Not a complete sentence. Just the two words, which somehow constituted an answer. Cell, her advisor, had requested his documentation file the second day. The file had been thin in the specific way that files were thin when someone had requested sections of them be removed or reclassified. And Cell had come to Vaelyn with the expression of someone who had pulled a thread and found it went considerably further than expected. "The registration says unclassified," Cell said. "But there's an authorization trace on the classification restriction from the Concordat Strategic Operations Division. Strategic Operations classifies their active operatives," Vaelyn said. "And their retired ones," Cell said. "When those retired operatives operated at a level the Concordat considers a standing security interest." She had looked at Cole Danner across the compound courtyard, where he was conducting what appeared to be his morning routine, which involved nothing that would be identified as a training regimen by any casual observer and which, to her trained eye, involved approximately 40 minutes of movement exercises that were the specific kind maintained by someone who needed to be ready rather than someone who was staying fit. She did not ask him about it directly. What changed her approach was the incident at the Third Trade Conference, which she had been required to attend despite the Concordat threat assessment listing the venue as a moderate-risk environment, primarily because the Vethari Third House's political position required a presence that absence would damage more than risk warranted. The threat arrived in the third hour. She had not seen it coming, which was, she later reflected, the point. The two figures who moved through the conference crowd toward her position had credentials that had passed 4 separate security verification systems. They had spent considerable resources acquiring those credentials, which told her they had spent considerable resources planning this, which told her she was the specific target rather than an opportunity. Cole saw it in the second hour. She knew this because he had positioned himself between her and the crowd shift an hour before anything happened, with a casual adjustment of someone rearranging for comfort. And when the two figures moved he was already moving, and what followed happened fast enough and quietly enough that the conference continued around it without the other attendees understanding anything had occurred. She understood. She had been trained to understand these things. "How long did you know?" she said, when they were in the secured transport afterward. "The credentials were right," he said. "Their hands weren't." She looked at him. "Their hands." People who hold credentials professionally hold them differently than people who are using them for the first time, he said. "The grip is different. I noticed in the second hour." She sat with this for a moment. "The strategic operations classification restriction," she said. "You know I looked." "I assumed you would," he said. "What did you actually do," she said, "before you became an unclassified budget tier contractor?" He looked out the transport window at the station they were departing. "Enough," he said. "That I retired." She looked at him. At the simple black t-shirt and the watch and the single small bag and the 40 minutes of movement that was not training. "Why the budget tier?" she said. "You could command." "I don't want to command anything," he said. "I want a quiet contract with manageable requirements." "I am apparently not a quiet contract," she said. "No," he said. "But the work is more interesting than I expected." She looked at him for a long moment with those pale silver blue eyes. "I'm going to need you to stop pretending you're an unclassified contractor," she said. "I am an unclassified contractor," he said. "Everything is documented correctly." "Cole," she said. He looked at her. "The man who noticed a credential-grip variance from 30 meters in a crowded conference room," she said, "is not unclassified. He is the opposite of unclassified." He was quiet for a moment. "The contract still stands," he said. "Budget tier." "I'm renegotiating the contract," she said. "On what grounds?" he said. "On the grounds," she said, "that I can't afford you and I need you, and those two things are both true and we should address both of them honestly." He looked at her for a long moment. Then something at the corner of his bearded mouth moved in the direction of a smile.